So we've got all this lovely data that we pulled from the GitHub API, but we're not doing anything with it. Let's do something with it. Instead of this H1, let's put an image. We saw user.avatar URL is the avatar. Instead of saying this.state.user every time, I just want to say user. So I'm going to go ahead and save that to a variable. So const, I'll use my fancy destructuring, user equals this.state. Not that different from when you import a named component. And exactly the same thing we're doing when we put the curly braces inside the argument list of a stateless functional component. So here I will say source equals user dot avatar underscore URL, I think it was. There it is. I don't need any alt text here because I'm going to go ahead and be descriptive underneath it. Let's put an H2 here. And let's say user dot, what else we got? User.login looks good. Everybody's going to have one of those, even if they don't have a name. Cool. So we can put some other good stuff we want. Followers, following, location. I'll go ahead and stick those in there. They may not be the most interesting data to you. And then let's link to their profile. HTML URL is that link. So I will just put an A, href to user dot HTML URL, wasn't it? Yep, HTML URL. I'll put target equals underscore blank. You know what that does? Opens it in a new tab. And I'll say link to user.login outside the curly braces, apostrophe S, profile. Location Indiana. Does it work? Click. Yep. In a new tab, no less. Cool. It's a little on the large side. So we could add a style sheet. Let's make one. Named exactly the same thing as my JS file. GitHub user.css. Before I forget, I'll go to GitHub user.js and import it. Otherwise, I will totally forget. /GitHub user.css. Let's give this, well, let's just do it like this. .GitHub user, that's the class that contains everything else. Space img. We'll give it a height of 200 pixels and a border radius of 50%. That should make it a circle. And GitHub user space h3. I'll give it a color of sort of a medium gray. So all of these are medium gray. And now we've got a nice circle for the avatar. Cool. That profile's really hugging the bottom there. We could, if we wanted to, just give the whole thing GitHub user margin bottom 16 pixels or something. There you go. Cool. Now type in a different username. Ah, crap. Didn't work. What gives? URL changed. State didn't change. Props changed. Why didn't state change? When does state change? When we call fetch user data, which we only do in the constructor. So the component's already loaded. The props changed because we navigated to a different URL, but it's the same component, so it didn't re-render. I mean, it did re-render, but state didn't change, so nothing happened. So I think we looked a while back at the various component will update, component did update stuff. So there's like component did update, I think. Which will run whenever props or state change. So if your props change, that will run again. So we could call fetch user data from there. I'm not going to because that's going to call it too many times. And I'm going to get locked out of the API. So I'm not going to do that. I did it this morning. I forgot that it would lock me out. There's one called componentWillReceiveProps. So it hasn't happened yet, but it's about to. New props are on their way in, and it's going to call this. And it's going to pass in the new props as an argument. So anytime you want something to happen just before your props get updated, you can do this. So we could use that to call fetch user data, but we need to make sure we do it with the new username. And we don't want to do it repeatedly. If something else changes inside the component, like the, but it's not a new user, we don't want to refetch the same user's data over and over. So new props, I will get history, location, and match again. So what I could do is check whether the location actually changed or whether it's the same username. So how about const location changed? Make that a Boolean. We'll set it to whether next props, or excuse me, new props, whatever I called it, new props dot location is not double equal to this dot props dot location. So if these are not equal, then I know the location changed. And if the location changed, then I do want to call fetch user data again with the new username. So here it's getting the username from this dot props dot match. So I could actually pass the props in as an argument here. Change it from this dot props to props. Make sure I change it up here, fetch user data props. That way here I can call this dot fetch user data and pass in the new props. See the difference? Instead of just getting it from whatever the current props are, I'll pass the props in as an argument. That way I can pass in the actual props or the incoming props right before the component actually updates. See what that does for us. And it did it anyway. It's now forbidden. Ah, come on. Ah. Really? API rate limit exceeded. Authenticated requests get a higher limit, so we could sign up for an API key. But yeah, I've locked myself out by doing too many in a short period of time, even though I was careful. That's a bummer. Happens every time. I got to figure out a way around that. But I think this should work. Pass props explicitly to fetch user data. Or, yeah.